Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Thanks for tuning in for another episode. I had an interesting conversation with a fellow fisherman the other day where they were telling me that the only time they'll fish a man-made channel is in the spring when the fish are spawning. And I thought to myself, I think you might be making a mistake. And you know, there's a lot of reasons why bass will use man-made channels, but they can very much be a year-round area. And if you're just really concentrating on it in the spring when the fish are spawning, you're probably missing out. Now obviously, you know, the springtime is really good for spawning fish, and you have to recognize why they're here, and it just has to do with the fact that you've got warmer water temps. That's primarily all it is. You know, we always think that all the fish spawn in the channels. They don't all spawn in the channels. You usually have your early spawners in the channels because that warms up the fastest, and then you start getting main lake spawners after that. But you gotta recognize that bass are cold-blooded creatures, so if they're looking to use the channels in the spring because the water's warm, well, they're going to be doing the same in the fall and the winter. You know, that you're going to generally have some warmer water on certain days later in the year as well. And a lot of times, even under the ice, you have a lot of fish that'll move back into a man-made channel like I'm in right here. It's just a it's a water temperature thing, so that you gotta recognize that. The other aspect is you also got to recognize what a lot of the other fish are doing that the bass feed on. Now right now in this channel there's a ton of shiners and small bluegill that the bass are back here feeding on, and those fish have actually moved back here off of the main river. So from that standpoint, you know, it's not a simple it's not just simply, you know, okay, the bass are only in there in the spring. Now in the summer you can definitely have a lot of fish that are still using channels if you've got good water depth, good grass growth. Maybe you've got some current that comes in the back of it with a natural creek, or maybe you've got you know, a lot of times you'll have like sewers and, you know, ditches and stuff that come in, drainage ditches. So if it rains, you'll have a lot of fresh water, and if you have fresh water pulling back into these areas, you will definitely have some fish as well. So it's definitely not just a springtime pattern. You know, you've got bluegill that are going to be back here year-round. A lot of times, yes, your bigger bluegill will move out, but you still have a lot of the young of the year bluegill that you'll have bass that are back here feeding on. A lot of times they'll pull back in the night period. They'll move up into these shallow channels. Now, I will say a couple of things I like to avoid are complete dead-end channels that don't wrap back up to the main lake, that don't you know, reconnect or don't have some sort of water coming in the back. I also don't necessarily like the biggest of man-made channels where you might have a giant complex. You know, if you've got miles upon miles of channel, you definitely can have fish that live back there, but a lot of times those are the ones that I find aren't as good necessarily in the summertime. But you know, no matter where you go across the country, if you've got dredged channels, whether it's in Wisconsin or Florida, wherever, you know, you've got a lot of good fish that can be using them throughout the winter months and the summer months and the spring. So it's one of those things where you just want to definitely not rule it right off completely like this other angler. I mean, this other angler just was like, I won't go in there. And I would say in most instances, you're probably not necessarily going to find the winning fish if you're talking about a 5-fish derby. But having said that, you definitely can still catch some really good fish, and under the right circumstances, you can find the winning fish in a channel. I mean, I've won a lot of money over the years that have been relating to channels that I caught fish in the fall or even in the summer months. And a lot of times it depends on the lake too. You know, if you're talking about a body of water that's got really big main lake you know, basins, a lot of times for largemouth, the channels can be the types of areas that they really like if they don't have the suitable habitat that's on the main lake. You know, they kind of just tend to live in a lot of your shallower bays and channels, and it's not unusual to run into that anywhere. But I just want you to don't ever rule anything necessarily completely out. Let the fish tell you what they want. And yes, you probably are not going to necessarily go into every channel and catch them, but if you do find channels that have the right grass, the right depth, some fresh water coming in the back, you can absolutely go to town and catch fish and find untouched populations, or find just really good schools of fish at the same time. So, having said that, I just thought I would give my 2 cents on fishing channels, because they can be a lot of fun. And in the spring and fall and winter period, they actually can be the primary pattern, depending on the lake you're on. Anyways, I appreciate all of you. Thanks for watching. Stay tuned. We'll have a new video coming out tomorrow.